Well, now it's time for a new section of the show where we doff our fascinators to the imagined matriarchy as we go about building our very own Womanifesto. All my guests get to nominate 3 policies they think would make the world a better place. And as High Empress of the show, I'll decide if they make the cut. So, Nichi, if you were in charge of everything, what would your 3 policies be? What's number 1?
Number 1 is probably sort the rape conviction rate out. Serious one to start with, but, you know, it's absolutely diabolical. Prosecutions for rape, bit different, are only at 1.6%. That's the lowest they've ever been. And convictions are pretty low. They're on their kind of second lowest year as of 2021. What is it about our society that we cannot prosecute and convict rapists and people that commit sexual assault? It is a massive, massive problem.
It's a huge problem. It's a debate I'm fascinated with because we're hearing increasingly about rape culture in schools, and that scares me. That really scares me. And I put a lot of this down to the fact that we've become such a hyper-sexualised society. You just have to see in the role models kids have today. You know, the Kardashians, who are people made on an operating table for the male gaze with zero discernible talent. What message is that sending to little girls? And what message is that sending to little boys as well? But do you think the problem is there is just a lot more rape around? And it's a very hard thing to try because it often happens in intimate surroundings without witnesses. So it's one person's word against another. Or is it that our legal system just hasn't looked into how we can manage this?
It's a few things, I think. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that more rape is happening than it was 100 years ago. I think what's happened is that we've got higher standards for our society, which is a good thing. We don't accept sexual violence the same way that we did 100 years ago. You know, when we introduced the law to say that it was now illegal to rape somebody within marriage, you know, that was only in the 1990s. It's kind of crazy thinking it was so recent, but the Victorians wouldn't have had that view. So that's important to say to start off with. But then it's how we go about collecting evidence and trying people. I mean, I was raped a few years ago and went public about it and told my story. But at the time, the reason it was so tricky is that I didn't know that if you didn't report it within 30 days, any TV evidence that might be around would have been destroyed. I didn't know that if somebody had touched me, I had to take my clothes off and put them in a paper bag, not a plastic bag, to preserve the evidence. These are not things that were generally told. So by the time I came comfortable enough to report it to the police, all the evidence they needed had been obliterated and there wasn't any of it left, so we couldn't have a conviction. And I must be one of thousands, I know I'm one of thousands of people who've been in exactly the same situation. And then the other thing is that in recent years, increasingly courtrooms have been looking through WhatsApp evidence of communications between people. Now, the problem with this is that if you say, OK, fine, take my phone away, and somebody goes through the messages you might have had with somebody you met on a dating app, which might be sexy, because that's how people communicate with each other sometimes, that has counted against women in particular in trials because we still sexually judge women to a different standard. So none of the ways that we are approaching, prosecuting and convicting rapists works at the minute.
No, I agree. Do you know, we're keeping that policy. We love it. Straight in the Womanifesto. What's number 2?
Number 2 is don't ask people if they're pregnant. Women is but no, this is a personal one for me because, full disclosure, I'm not pregnant. I don't even know if I ever will be or if I ever want to be. But at Christmas, I had a picture taken on Christmas Eve. I had been eating a few pies, Christmas pies, mince pies, and I was stood at a weird angle and it was satin, which is never the most flattering fabric. I put a picture on my Instagram with my, friends and family, and immediately got this slurry of replies saying, "Oh, when's the baby due? Are you pregnant?"
No.
I just had to laugh, though, because I got married in November 2020. It was a sort of lockdown micro wedding, and we meant to have a big wedding that got cancelled. But since I've got married, people's interest in my reproductive future has just gone off the charts, and they never asked my husband. So I'm just so fed up of it.
It's the thing. I hit the grand old age of 38 on Boxing Day, and you get that sort of like, well, you're cracking on with it then.
Absolutely.
And it's like, leave me alone. Yeah, no, I like it. That's in the manifesto. Womanifesto. Okay. Now, the third one, I think, is about...
I can't remember. Oh, my gosh, what is it? Hang on. I don't want to say my trigger.
Affordable childcare,
there we go.
I'm being told in my ear.
Thank you, everyone.
Other women paying attention today. Affordable... This is interesting, because it kind of ties in with all of it, doesn't it? I always think it's crazy that we live in a world where you have breakout spaces and basketball hoops and rooftop bars in new offices, but nowhere to put kids.
Absolutely. And maybe this is part of the reason why I don't want people to ask me if I'm pregnant or consider it, because I couldn't afford to have a baby anyway. I think what is really damning about affordable childcare is the fact that We are a very wealthy country. We've got great infrastructure. We know how to look after children, and yet we don't do it. And one of the last kind of bastions for women is the fact that they cannot afford to put their kids in childcare and to carry on working. Most women will tell you that even if they go to work, even if it's full-time, not alone part-time, that their wage barely covers the cost of childcare. That doesn't make any sense. What are we doing in raising the next generation of kids if we aren't helping people to, afford to have them? It's just ludicrous.
Do you know what? It's almost as if birth was invented yesterday, isn't it?